Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the 1985 film Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Have the DVD here. Road Warrior also on this one. So this is the third entry in the Mad Max series, and in some ways the most fascinating one for me, anyway. For me, I know this can be maybe a divisive film for some fans of the series, but I'll make a case for it, and I just had a few points I wanted to make about Beyond Thunderdome. Really, my main idea here is that this film is about the power of story, the power of myth to shape civilization. And I really appreciate how George Miller and Terry Hayes, their script, gets that idea across. I should mention George Miller came back to direct. Also, George Ogilvy got a co-directing credit on this film. But I really want to focus on that aspect of it as how it's about a movie about the power of storytelling. So it's really a fascinating arc with the Mad Max series, where the first film, very much of the 1970s, the vigilante genre, where in that story, Max is a patrolman or cop who is dealing with vicious gangs. Civilization is starting to fall apart, but not quite yet. His family is, of course, killed, and he becomes a vigilante, very much like that Dirty Harry, Death Wish, Charles Bronson idea of the 70s, but done in this really heightened way in this Australian setting, which really made that a unique film. And the second one, The Road Warrior, we're in the post-apocalyptic world, and Mad Max in this one is a mercenary who agrees to help a community of people defend themselves against these raiders, and it's almost like one of those old samurai stories of the wandering Ronin who agrees to help a village defend itself. So, 2 is a very muscular, very action-driven movie, also influential through the 1980s. So really a fascinating aesthetic with the Road Warrior. And Beyond Thunderdome really shifts gears. This is, although we get a big chase, the themes are quite rich in this film. It's really told in 3 different acts, and maybe that's why this film can be a bit, maybe not feel as tight as the other 2. The first section of this film, where with Max, it's years later. We're not sure how much time has passed, where he goes to Bartertown, this city that's arisen from the ashes of civilization, and it's really like a facsimile of the civilization that failed. It's industrial. They're able to create energy with methane from cow dung, basically, which is kind of funny. And we see. I'll talk more about this, but it's like this facsimile of the old civilization. And then we get to the second middle part of the film, where Max has been cast out of Bartertown, and finds this community of children who have built their own culture based on mythology and stories. And I'll talk more about that. And then the third part of the film is the big chase, where Bartertown and is after these kids who need to escape. So it's really those 3 sections of the film. There's really a strong Lucas Spielberg influence on Thunderdome. Miller did have a much bigger budget, double the budget to work with on this one. And, you could say he is maybe mainstreaming the series a little bit. It's not nearly as violent as the previous 2. But that Lucas Spielberg influence of Lucas's myth making and Spielberg's fascination with childhood and wonder and young people building a community. So even stylistically, there's a lot of Lucas Spielberg in here. I feel like Bartertown at times has like a Return of the Jedi parallel with Jabba's palace, like all these. It's very darkly lit, and there's all these strange characters, menacing characters wandering around, and the Planet Earth section with the kids is very Spielbergian in a lot of ways, and that's there too. So, and I think like the influence of Lucas and Spielberg was everywhere in the 80s. We are in the blockbuster era of films, And Miller here is clearly trying to build the audience for the series. And I should mention it stars Mel Gibson, who's back, of course, and Tina Turner, who was a huge, huge pop star, rock star of the mid 80s, as Auntie Entity, who is the de facto ruler of Bartertown. And I think she gives a really good performance in the film as well. Back to Lucas Spielberg thing, they're often criticized, like the Star Wars movies or E.T., as being very much in line with the Reagan ethos of childhood wonder and very clear morality, right? Like this kind of very a black and white morality we get in Star Wars and stories like that. I push back against that view. I think it's not fully in line with like this Reagan ideal, but I'll have a little more to say about that. Well, I'll just kind of go right into that right now. I think Bartertown is almost like this. It's like sort of like we're trying to bring back the old capitalist form. It's a very hierarchical community. It's industrial. It's transactional. There's the threat of violence everywhere. So there's a lot of these things. And like Lucas and Spielberg and Miller, Reagan was also a storyteller, and that's what made him effective with his rhetoric. And Reagan's rhetoric was all about the free market and making Americans feel very good about themselves. And there was the Morning in America and all the studies done on that. But really beneath, though, Reagan's rhetoric, there's a lot of darkness there, because what he was doing, he's deregulating the economy, he's breaking up unions, he is, going after the social safety net. So there's a lot of what Reagan's doing is kind of, it's more individualistic rhetoric, and in some ways it's not building community. In some ways it's not doing that at all. So I think we see some of that with Bartertown on one level, and all the strange characters there, and spectacle, and the big role that spectacle plays, the actual Thunderdome itself, where they have these death matches, and as we get a great fight between the Master Blaster and Mad Max in that scene, which is really well staged and has a really interesting look to it. But really, though, I think this movie, it's about the power of story to shape civilization. And definitely when we get to Planet with the kids, we see that, because they've built their own culture around, they were in a plane crash, survivors of a plane crash, and before everything went bad. And so they have all these artifacts from the before times, and they've built their own myths, their own stories around it. And that's formed a sort of almost cohesion among the community. It's not, the myths and the stories are not destructive. They are there to bind everyone together, and it's a more of a communal type of place, very much in contrast to Bartertown, where Max has been. So I find that fascinating how that goes there. Talking about the arc of Max's character in this one, and he becomes an archetype, really a mythic symbol, where the kids think that Max is a messiah, the captain of their airplane who's returned and is going to lead them to the promised land. Of course, Max denies he's not Captain Walker, as the character says, but in his own way, Max does become the mythical figure, though, because he does end up leading the kids to a future that they can build on, as when they escape the attack from Bartertown at the end of the film. And Max becomes like a reluctant archetype in this film, where he leads them, and he could have stayed and became their leader, but Max chooses not to do that. He chooses to go off by himself. The final shot of the film of him wandering the desert, great shot. It's very Old Testament, it's very biblical, and I think there's some strong biblical themes happening. And I don't have any religious agenda of trying to push or anything like that, but reading the Bible as myth and narrative and storytelling, you can read Max as like a Moses figure, and he doesn't join them to paradise. The children have to go, and he leaves and goes off to the next adventure. So I really like that arc that we get with Max here in the film, and Tina Turner's character also has a great arc where she's a complicated character in the film as well, and I think the way she delegates authority and the way she uses her authority, and I like that she lets Max go at the end, calling him Raggedy Man. So I think her character as well is complex in that way. I just like that theme of myth making and storytelling that we get here. It really, the world building, it really, I think, expands this series and will set the stage for the next two films, where there will be a big gap, like 25, 30 years until we get to Fury Road and Furiosa. But I think in the Fury Road film, we see Max in a similar role where he helps Furiosa and her people get to where they need to be, and he leaves. So I find that very consistent with his character. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Thunderdome. The film looks great. It's well shot. Maybe the only criticism of the film is that the script could have been a little bit tighter, but I find the theme so rich here that it doesn't really bother me too much, and it's yeah, and thinking of it as a 1980s film where it's kind of in that Lucas Spielberg area as far as how it's telling stories, but I think it's offering kind of a. I don't see this as a reactionary film at all. I think there's actually a lot of really more progressive ideas we get in Thunderdome, and the direction that Miller is taking the series, and released in '85, really at the height of Reaganism in Western culture. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Thunderdome. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.